Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving into a story that honestly feels like it belongs in an epic, cinematic, historical documentary, but it's entirely real. Just imagine walking into a grocery store today, heading down the baking aisle, and paying the price of solid gold for just a handful of black pepper. Sounds absolutely ridiculous, right? But for centuries, that was the reality. Tiny, everyday ingredients sitting in your kitchen cabinet literally shaped human history. We're talking about kings fighting over them, merchants crossing deadly oceans, pirates stealing them, and massive empires rising from the ground up, all because of spices.
Okay, let's dive into this. Today, a little jar of pepper, it's gonna run you maybe $3 or $4, but in the ancient world, those exact same peppercorns were paid for with their exact weight in solid gold. Seriously, thousands of people lost their lives trying to control the trade of this one dusty little berry. It wasn't just a way to make your food taste better, it was literally one of the most valuable, heavily guarded substances on planet Earth.
So that brings us to the ultimate question we really need to answer today. Why did people kill for pepper? How did something so small, something you could just tuck inside a tiny pouch, cause pirates to raid vessels, merchants to risk the deadliest oceans, and the world's greatest superpowers to literally draw their swords? Well, to understand that, we have to completely change the way we look at our own pantries. Part 1. The treasure hidden in your kitchen. Now, what's really interesting here is how people viewed the very things you probably have sitting in your spice rack right now. Thousands of years ago, ordinary spices like cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves, and black pepper, they weren't just simple cooking ingredients. They were bathed in mystery. Ancient civilizations genuinely believed they possessed magical powers. They were prescribed as heavy-duty medicine by the world's leading physicians. They were absolutely crucial for preserving food way before refrigerators existed. And above all, they symbolized immense wealth. The royal elite, they displayed their exotic spices exactly the same way billionaires display luxury cars today. The more spices you owned, the richer, the more cultured, and the more powerful you appeared to society. In fact, their value was so universally recognized that they became what's called commodity money. Commodity money is basically a system where an everyday item with intrinsic value literally functions as cash. So, during these ancient trade eras, peppercorns weren't just traded for money, they were the money. You could literally pay your rent, settle up your taxes with the government, or even fund entire armies using bags of black pepper. Just picture an ancient marketplace where a sack of dusty pepper acted as cold, hard cash. Crazy, right? Part 2. India, the land of spices. To find the source of this incredibly valuable currency, we've got to travel to India. For centuries, India was the undisputed center of the whole global spice trade, the absolute origin point for the most prized ingredients on Earth. And the most famous of these? It was known as black gold. This was black pepper harvested right from the sun-drenched Malabar coast. Merchants from Rome, Arabia, Persia, and China, they risked deadly ocean storms and scorching deserts for a product that could just fit inside a small pouch. It was incredibly high risk, sure, but the profits? They were so extraordinary that absolutely everyone wanted a piece of the action. Part 3. The Roman Obsession. Now, nobody wanted a share of this market quite as desperately as the Romans. As the Roman Empire expanded and just kept getting richer, their appetite for exotic luxuries completely exploded. Honestly, Rome became utterly addicted to these foreign spices. Pepper was an absolute necessity at royal banquets. Wealthy Romans were seasoning practically everything with it, mostly just as a pure display of status. And the demand got so incredibly intense that Rome actually started shipping massive, enormous amounts of real gold eastward just to satisfy their cravings. Some Roman leaders actually started panicking. They were worrying aloud that their mighty empire was draining all its wealth and becoming dangerously addicted to foreign luxury goods. But, the banquets never stopped. The flow of pepper had to continue. Let's move on and see how this builds, because this obsession created a sprawling global supply chain. First, spices were harvested on the Malabar coast. Then, they were distributed by Arab and Venetian middlemen, before finally arriving to fuel those lavish Roman banquets. But as Europe moved into the Renaissance, monarchs looked at this whole journey and realized something pretty shocking. The middlemen had a total stranglehold on the trade. They were marking up prices astronomically. If a European king wanted spices, he had to pay the middleman's price. No exceptions. So European monarchs did the only thing they could do. They retreated to their map rooms. Part 4. The Age of Exploration. European rulers realized they needed to cut out the middlemen entirely. They desperately needed a direct sea route to Asia. And this desperate, high-stakes search, it ushered in the Age of Exploration. It was a pursuit that literally redrew the map of the world forever, and it almost immediately escalated into a brutal race for global power. Empires didn't just want a friendly trade deal, they wanted an absolute monopoly. Massive naval battles started erupting across oceans. We're talking fleets of heavily armed galleons firing cannons at one another in tropical waters. Trade routes were aggressively seized, and these massive, imposing stone fortresses were built on distant shores just to guard these precious plants. It turned into an unprecedented global arms race between the world's heavyweights. Portugal, Spain, the Netherlands, Britain, they all poured their state treasuries into building colossal navies, and they were all fiercely competing to dominate the spice trade. They were sending navigators across unknown, totally terrifying oceans, not to discover new philosophies, but literally to lock down the supply of cinnamon and cloves. Part 5. The Bloody Nutmeg Wars. Perhaps no conflict was darker or more intense than the battle over one specific ingredient, nutmeg. At one point, nutmeg was considered completely priceless. Why? Because across Europe, people desperately believed that it could actually cure deadly diseases. Its perceived medical and magical value soared so unbelievably high that nations were willing to fight literal bloody wars just to possess the only place on Earth where it grew, a tiny cluster of tropical islands. This insatiable desire for absolute profit completely transformed a tropical paradise into a devastating zone of conflict. The Dutch fought fiercely to establish a total, ruthless monopoly on nutmeg production in the Banda Islands. And to maintain that grip, they resorted to extreme violence and subjugation. Entire local populations suffered, were displaced, or were killed. All so colonial powers could control the global price of this one single spice. That staggering wealth came at a truly horrific human cost. Part 6. Spices built empires. So the crucial point is that the sheer volume of wealth generated by this intense, bloody global conflict literally changed the trajectory of human civilization. Massive historical trading ports filled up with merchant ships. Trade companies like the Dutch East India Company became global corporate superpowers, complete with their own private armies. Coastal ports expanded into massive cities, and modern banking flourished just to finance these incredibly risky but incredibly lucrative oceanic voyages. What started out as a simple human search for better flavor actually birthed the complex, interconnected modern world economy we live in today. Part 7. The Legacy of Spices. Fast forward to today, and these ingredients just sit quietly on supermarket shelves. You can grab a jar of pepper for a few bucks. Cinnamon is available almost everywhere you look. Yet, hidden right behind these quiet, everyday ingredients is a dark, sprawling, cinematic story of intense ambition, devastating conflict, insatiable greed, and groundbreaking innovation. And this brilliantly illustrates something profound. The global map, our modern borders, our expansive global trade routes, and the rise of massive global empires. All of it was driven, at least in part, by something as fundamentally simple and human as wanting a better-tasting meal. It is a really powerful reminder that history isn't just shaped by grand political ideologies or abstract philosophies. Sometimes the absolute smallest things, a tiny dried berry, a shaving of bark, a grated seed, they leave the absolute biggest mark on the world. They build fortunes, they redraw maps, they change history forever. So, I leave you with this final thought to ponder. The next time you sit down at a table and you casually sprinkle some black pepper onto your meal, will you remember the mighty navies that crossed oceans for it, the empires that were built, and the blood that was spilled just to bring it to your plate? Thank you for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring the incredible stories hidden right in plain sight.